Hello, everyone, and welcome to webinar number 3. I'm Eric Snyder, and I'm the Executive Director of the Wilmot Technology and Innovation Group here at the University of Rochester Medical Center and the Wilmot Cancer Institute. So in our last couple of webinars, we showcased live demos of specific technologies. This month, due to some of the conferences, speeches, and the overall busy August, we're shifting gears to a more interactive format, essentially a question and answer style session covering a wide range of topics. I've gotten quite a number of questions about product management, leadership strategies, and just the overall technology in the future submitted over the last month. So we're going to tackle some of those. Looking ahead to September, we'll return to our technical focus with a live demonstration of EOS. This one should be really an interesting webinar as it demonstrates some of the technical sophistications that we haven't shown you yet that our team is currently developing. But before diving into your submitted questions, I'd like to take a minute or two to provide some background on our team, our technology, and the future direction that we're taking here. So, because this should help answer or address several of the questions that we received, at least at a very high level. So our core mission is to support the strategic vision of the Wilmot Cancer Institute. From a technical perspective, that means providing robust support to clinical operations, clinical trials, nursing, administration, research, shared resources, all with specific focus on cancer-related initiatives. What this amounts to for our team splits us into a couple different domains. We have the typical keep the lights on style stuff that we handle. So your ad hoc reporting, your dashboards, your basic technical consultations. And these are things that I sometimes talk and write about, but unfortunately, they don't often get that shiny treatment of the cutting edge technology we develop. Honestly, though, it should, as a large part of why this team is so successful is our ability to handle the keep the lights on type stuff far more efficiently than is typically seen within the industry. So our entire technical makeup is set up to ensure extremely quick turnaround times for any ad hoc report request or dashboard request. Our average turnaround is less than a day for this type of stuff, often amounting to hours. Whereas for anyone listening from other healthcare groups, or if you've ever been in the industry, you know that this is sort of unheard of, as the turnaround is usually measured in weeks, if not months. How we do this and the technology behind it, which we call the Hyperion Data Manager, is actually something we are discussing for another webinar, probably in a few months from now. The Hyperion Data Manager is a little bit harder to show in a webinar style format because by its very nature, most of it is PHI. The other half of what this team does is what gets talked about a lot. It wins a lot of awards. It's that shiny technology stuff, the cutting edge stuff like Martha, Canvas, EOS, Thea, Hypergen, Cohort Builder, and so on. Because we have the keep the lights on stuff so manageable, we're often focused on this cutting edge tech, and that is actually one of the key pillars to our success. So I generally talk about the 4 key pillars to our success. This is a big one. If you're able to lower the skill floor enough on the tasks that you must do to keep the things running, you're able to focus more on advancing technology and achieving key strategic goals. This has also really demonstrated the power behind a solid data foundational layer. We don't just take the data in from hundreds of data sources in real time. We keep them always updated. We have extensive validation scripts constantly running to ensure data quality. And in general, this helps us to really push forward. None of this is easy, obviously. The reason I give you this intro, though, is a lot of these submitted questions have to do with that how did we get to this point? How do we have the people that can handle this in space traditionally lower paying and without the necessary staffing? And the answer to those, at least at a very high level, is basically lower that skill floor enough and automate what you can so the focus can be where it needs to be. So without further ado, let's get to some of these questions. So we had far more submitted questions than I could possibly answer here, at least in the time frame that we have. Due to that, like any geeky technology team, we had created a Python script and copy and pasted all these things in there to randomize it. So, you know, I'll answer as many as I can within the time that we have here. All right, so getting to the first question. probably should have QA'd this before. There it is. Randomized scripts. What technology and languages are your team using and why? So they it's a little varied, but the majority of the applications that we have that I post about and that are on the website are using an MS SQL backend, sitting on a server that we manage. There are some no SQL um, things that we're running, which we'll talk about as some of the innovations we haven't disclosed yet over the next few months. But for the vast majority of applications now and probably many into the future will be MS SQL. The other side of it is Python and Flask. The vast majority are Python and Flask. There's some React in there, but it's generally Python, Flask, MS SQL, and that kind of stuff. The why portion of why we did this, 6 years ago when we had started this team, and I was talking to one of the architects, we really thought about this question a lot, and a lot of this, the answer to why we chose Python and MSQL, for example, has to do with the original vision for Hyperion itself was to be sort of a plug and play system, an ecosystem, if you will, that allowed any researcher, any clinician that knew code to be able to code out what they needed and attach it to Hyperion. And Hyperion handles the data governance, the ticketing, all of the data upkeep and all that kind of stuff. But what I realized, as we went on, is people didn't really want to do that. There are a couple people who do use Hyperion in that way, but most people just wanted us to design the apps. So we ended up designing the apps. But along those lines, we wanted to pick technologies that were most commonly known within this industry. That being MS SQL for database and backend, and then for programming languages, Python, R, and SAS or whatever were your most common three. R was probably more common in the research community than Python, but we settled on Python because it kind of crossed both worlds. More developers would know Python, or if we felt would know Python, at least from the statistics out there. So we settled on those, and that's how we came to our tech stack. Okay, so next question. What do you think are the largest issues facing healthcare IT right now? So, this is a tough question. I think that my opinion on this hasn't changed in the last 6 years, and certainly beyond those as a consultant and all that. I still think it's ultimately the data foundational layer issues in healthcare. So data in healthcare is different than everywhere else. It's messy. It's obviously it's not 100% accurate. There's a lot of subjective data. So my pain score is different than your pain score of 5 type deal. There's a distinct lack of definitions for data and what people are asking for, which makes things even more difficult. Sometimes within the same organization, certainly outside of organizations. And ultimately, data interoperability is really, really challenging because those definitions are different and how people handle things and the technical sophistication needed sometimes to do things like something like fire. Your small organizations aren't going to easily be able to do that. So there's flaws in every approach. And so that is what I would say is still the largest issue facing. And you can see this anywhere, including the NIH. I was just on a webinar for a cancer NIH, a webinar focused on cancer, where it was the second time I had heard of them moving away from something like FHIR into their own data models and all these types of things. It's also why we created Hyperion. I mean, it's the base root of everything that we did. Having that no code always updated with all these validation scripts being taken care of so that people can just focus on what they need to do was an incredibly large reason for Hyperion. And I can go on and on about that, but I still think it's data, because I think without that foundational layer, everyone's focused on AI, for example, you're not going to get too far with AI if your data is not validated and cleaned and all that kind of stuff. And in healthcare, it just isn't. So that's what I would go with for that question. So how exactly are you able to produce reports so quickly, and what is the technical reason? So I kind of talked at a high level about this at the start here, but I guess for this question, I'll delve deeper into that. And this is a question that I could give an answer and that I've given speeches on for hours. So I'll pick something to sort of delve deeper on. And the answer to that is the Hyperion Data Manager. It's sort of a different way of thinking. So let's pick on Epic for a second, since it's so big and most people know it. Epic's database, if there's many ways to attach, there's many different types of ways to deal with this, but let's just talk about Clarity for a second. Clarity has something like, I forget what it is. It's 100,000 tables or something insane, we'll just say. And hundreds of thousands of fields in it. And those fields aren't made like a clinician, a nurse, an MD, researcher, whatever, would think of them. And they're often named not like a programmer would think of them either. And so what happens is, to design seemingly simple reports, you often have a lot more time than to design those things than it would generally take in other industries. You combine this with, a lot of times healthcare is employing technical leaning clinical individuals that might have to write these reports, and not necessarily industry level technical individuals who studied this and know these in deep SQL terms. And you get these reports that take weeks or months, like I had mentioned at the start. So what we did was we decided to create our own data model to redefine all these, semantically redefine everything into terms that made sense. So, patient name, medication, labs, and so on and so forth are all named exactly as you would expect them, where they're not in these EHRs. And they're all combined and normalized. And because again, in Clarity, you could get their normal form. Sometimes you might get something else. It's just all over the map. The idea being that we would lower the skill floor enough that taking someone just out of college, for example, that knew SQL off the streets, and giving them a query that would normally take a week for most people, they should be able to do in a few hours without even really training, as long as they understood the basic terminology of medications, labs, zip codes, whatever the case may be. And that's the start of how we did it. Obviously, there's an incredible amount of validation, and there's probably 100 other things that I could mention for this question. But that kind of gives you an idea of how we start to lower the skill floor with Hyperion Data Manager, which and hopefully we can talk about in a future webinar. Where do you think the future is with health IT? So I think I'm supposed to say AI, and to be honest, a lot of the future is with AI, even though I do think a lot of AI in healthcare is hype. Everyone's putting LLMs into everything they do, or like search with human text and all that kind of stuff, and so are we. But I think the future is still in someone, or not someone. I mean, we've figured it out, and I know there's a couple other people who have gone down this road as well. And you see within the NIH, to digress a little bit, I think the future is in finding that data foundational layer that is interoperable to everyone. So Germany's done this, as a nation state. I don't know that without laws in place that you could really do it. I think you would have to do it slowly then and get a few organizations to agree to these things. But I really think it's in that data foundational layer, getting a true interoperable system between systems and all that kind of stuff, which you would need people to work together. And it's a tough one. But once you have that, we've proven, at least as a team, how fast you can iterate development of systems. So with the Hyperion Data Manager, we were able to we had to take a couple steps back and spend 6 months making that work. But after we did that, we took quite a leap forward. I think the same thing holds true with AI. When you have that, we're now entering, at least in our team, the phase of dealing with Hyperion AI and all those types of things, which I've posted about recently. We held off, for those first 8 months or whatever that everyone's been pushing out AI systems. We did more traditional AI, but now we can push out AI systems faster, most likely than anyone, because we spent so much time on that foundational layer and didn't worry about that fear of missing out type stuff. So I think the future is certainly things like AI. But I think to really move this industry ahead, there is going to have to be some kind of stepping a few steps back and figuring out, these data issues. I mean, it's extreme. As a consultant, in my past life, I'd been in 40 or 50 of the top institutions in America. Everyone has the same problem. Everyone. So, there's a lot of publications or a lot of presentations and press about, company or healthcare organization X implemented this AI, but and then people have the fear of missing out. But I would question what that implementation is, at least from like an industry developer perspective, because I haven't seen anything that is too crazy amazing that we didn't already know about. I hear health tech is years behind. Is it, and why? So, yes, I mean, I think it probably is years behind, but I don't know if that's necessarily always the complete fault of healthcare and all of that. I think that when you get into looking at like how healthcare runs, it's a lot more challenging than other industries, in fairness. Like that example I gave of pain scores, if you were asked to, plot a chart of patients' pain scores with, that were on this drug, you would have to know an awful lot of knowledge to understand how to sort of tease that out. But you also have data in healthcare that's just going to be wrong because you're relying on patients to tell you certain things, and they're going to change the way that they say it and how it gets entered. So, we've taken a lot of steps to, for example, to correct race, to make sure that we're getting, not correct it, but to make sure that we're getting the correct race, sex, ethnicity, gender, and so on and so forth. But ultimately, you're reliant on whatever a patient marks on the paper or what they tell you, and that's not always easy. So obviously, building like things like AI off of that becomes really challenging in other routes. But so is it years behind? It probably is. The other half of this is healthcare generally does not hire highly technical industry people. There are always some, but a lot of the systems are being run by clinical folks with technical leaning, which you would absolutely need, because that's who should be determining what's getting done to the technical folks and all of that. But I think we did some research as well, and I know we did some research as well on the top 200 organizations and what their technical leadership looked like. And it was something like less than half of them were actually technical people in like CIO and CTO positions, which I know is probably a little controversial, but I think they mostly had MBAs. When this doesn't occur in other industries, and because we also looked at other industries, the top 200 in like finance, the top 200 in law, and for example, and it's almost 98% of them have technical backgrounds of some sort. But healthcare doesn't do that for whatever reason. I think that also sort of hurts the healthcare being behind phase, because there are a lot of things that I hear in conferences and stuff that I could tell you aren't really technically accurate. Now we're getting into the real controversial territory, but I think those are some of the reasons that that that's the case. It's starting to turn around, though. You see a lot of organizations building in innovation groups, machine learning groups, and stuff like that. So I think the industry as a whole has started to sort of realize that. Um, we are way over. So I think I'll end it there. Maybe we'll do another one at some point. Um, but hopefully those answers make sense. And look forward to seeing everyone in September for EOS, which should be pretty fun. Thank you.